Shemot, Exodus chapter 25. And Yahweh spoke unto Moshe, saying,
Speak unto the children of Yasharel, that they bring me an offering. Of every man that gives it willingly with his heart, ye shall take my offering. And this is the offering which ye shall take of them: gold, and silver, and brass, and blue, and purple, and scarlet, and fine linen, and goat's hair, and ram skin dyed red, and badger skin, and shittim wood, oil for the light, spices for anointing oil, and for sweet incense, onyx stones, and stones to be set in the ephod, in the breastplate. And let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them, according to all that I show you, after the pattern of the tabernacle, and the pattern of all the instruments thereof, even so shall ye make it. And they shall make an ark of shittim wood, 2 cubits and a half shall be the length thereof, and a cubit and a half the breadth thereof, and a cubit and a half the height thereof. And you shall overlay it with pure gold, within and without shall you overlay it, and shall make upon it a crown of gold round about. And you shall cast 4 rings of gold for it, and put them in the corners thereof, and 2 rings shall be in the one side of it, and 2 rings on the other side of it. And you shall make staves of shittim wood, and overlay them with gold. And you shall put the staves into the rings by the sides of the ark, that the ark may be borne with them. The staves shall be in the rings of the ark, they shall not be taken from it. And you shall put into the ark the testimony which I give you. And you shall make a mercy seat of pure gold. 2 cubits and a half shall be the length thereof, and a cubit and a half the breadth thereof. And you shall make 2 cherubim of gold, of beaten work shall you make them, in the 2 ends of the mercy seat. And make 1 cherub on one end, and the other cherub on the other end. Even of the mercy seat shall ye make the cherubim on the 2 ends thereof. And the cherubim shall stretch forth their wings on high, covering the mercy seat with their wings, and their faces shall look one to another. Towards the mercy seat shall the faces of the cherubim be. And you shall put the mercy seat above upon the ark, and in the ark you shall put the testimony that I shall give you. And there I will meet with you, and I will commune with you from above the mercy seat, from between the 2 cherubim which are upon the ark of the testimony, of all things which I give you in commandment unto the children of Yasharel. You shall also make a table of shittim wood. 2 cubits shall be the length thereof, and a cubit the breadth thereof, and a cubit and a half the height thereof. And you shall overlay it with pure gold, and make thereto a crown of gold round about. And you shall make unto it a border of a handbreadth round about. And you shall make a golden crown to the border thereof round about. And you shall make it 4 rings of gold, and put the rings in the 4 corners that are on the 4 feet thereof. Over against the border shall the rings be for places of the staves to bear the table. And you shall make the staves of shittim wood, and overlay them with gold, that the table may be borne with them. And you shall make dishes thereof, and spoons thereof, and covers thereof, and bowls thereof. To cover withal of pure gold shall you make them. And you shall set upon the table showbread before me always. And you shall make a menorah, 7-branched candlestick of pure gold. Of beaten work shall the menorah be made. His shaft and his branches, his bowls, his knops, and his flowers shall be of the same. And 6 branches shall come out of the sides of it, 3 branches of the menorah out of the one side, and 3 branches of the menorah out of the other side. 3 bowls made like unto almonds, with a knop and a flower in one branch, and 3 bowls made like almonds in the other branch, with a knop and a flower. So in the 6 branches that come out of the menorah. And in the menorah shall be 4 bowls made like unto almonds, with their knops and their flowers. And there shall be a knop under 2 branches of the same, and a knop under 2 branches of the same, and a knop under 2 branches of the same, according to the 6 branches that proceed out of the menorah. Their knops and their branches shall be of the same, All of it shall be one beaten work of pure gold. And you shall make the 7 lamps thereof, and they shall light the lamps thereof, that they may give light over against it. And the tongs thereof, and the snuff dishes thereof, shall be of pure gold. Of a talent of pure gold shall he make it, with all these vessels. And look that you make them after the pattern, which was showed you in the mount.
Shemot, Exodus chapter 26.
Moreover, you shall make the tabernacle with 10 curtains of fine twined linen, and blue and purple, and scarlet, with cherubim of cunning work shall you make them. The length of one curtain shall be 28 cubits, and the breadth of one curtain 4 cubits. Every one of the curtains shall have one measure. The 5 curtains shall be coupled together, one to another, and other 5 curtains shall be coupled one to another. And you shall make loops of blue upon the edge of the one curtain from the selvage in the coupling, and likewise shall you make in the uttermost edge of another curtain in the coupling of the second. 50 loops shall you make in the one curtain, and 50 loops shall you make in the edge of the curtain that is the coupling of the second, and the loops may take hold one of another. And you shall make 50 taches of gold, and couple the curtains together with the taches, and it shall be one tabernacle. And you shall make curtains of goat hair to be a covering upon the tabernacle. 11 curtains shall you make. The length of one curtain shall be 30 cubits, and the breadth of one curtain 4 cubits, and the 11 curtains shall be all of one measure. And you shall couple 5 curtains by themselves, and 6 curtains by themselves, and shall double the 6th curtain in the forefront of the tabernacle. And you shall make 50 loops on the edge of the one curtain that is utmost in the coupling, and 50 loops in the edge of the curtain which couples the second. And you shall make 50 taches of brass, and put the taches into the loops, and couple the tent together, that it may be one. And the remnant that remains of the curtain of the tent, the half curtain that remains, shall hang over the backside of the tabernacle, and a cubit on the one side, and a cubit on the other side, of that which remains in the length of the curtains of the tent. It shall hang over the sides of the tabernacle, on this side and on that side, to cover it. And you shall make a covering for the tent of ram skin dyed red, and a covering above of badger's skin. And you shall make the boards for the tabernacle of shittim wood, standing up. 10 cubits shall be the length of a board, and a cubit and a half shall be the breadth of one board. 2 tenons shall be in one board, set in order one against another. Thus shall you make for all the boards of the tabernacle. You shall make the boards for the tabernacle, 20 boards on the south side southward. And you shall make 40 sockets of silver under the 20 boards, 2 sockets under one board for his 2 tenons, and 2 sockets under another board for his 2 tenons. And for the second side of the tabernacle, on the north side, there shall be 20 boards, and their 40 sockets of silver, 2 sockets under one board, and 2 sockets under another board. And for the sides of the tabernacle westward, you shall make 6 boards, and 2 boards shall you make for the corners of the tabernacle in the 2 sides. And they shall be coupled together beneath, and they shall be coupled together above the head of it unto one ring. Thus shall it be for them both. They shall be for the 2 corners. And they shall be 8 boards, and their sockets of silver, 16 sockets, 2 sockets under one board, and 2 sockets under another board. And you shall make bars of shittim wood, 5 for the boards of the one side of the tabernacle, and 5 bars for the boards of the other side of the tabernacle, and 5 bars for the boards of the side of the tabernacle for the 2 sides westward. And the middle bar in the middle of the boards shall reach from end to end. And you shall overlay the boards with gold, and make their rings of gold for places for the bars. And you shall overlay the bars with gold. And you shall rear up the tabernacle according to the fashion thereof, which was showed you in the mount. And you shall make a veil of blue, and purple, and scarlet, and fine twined linen of cunning work, with cherubim shall it be made. And you shall hang it upon the 4 pillars of shittim wood, overlaid with gold. Their hooks shall be of gold, upon the 4 sockets of silver. And you shall hang up the veil under the taches, that you may bring in hither within the veil the ark of the testimony, and the veil shall divide unto you between the holy place and the most holy. And you shall put the mercy seat upon the ark of the testimony in the most holy place. And you shall set the table without the veil, and the menorah, 7-branched candlestick, over against the table on the side of the tabernacle towards the south. And you shall put the table on the north side. And you shall make a hanging for the door of the tent of blue and purple and scarlet and fine twined linen, wrought with needlework. And you shall make for the hanging 5 pillars of shittim wood, and overlay them with gold, and their hooks shall be of gold, and you shall cast 5 sockets of brass for them.
Shemot, Exodus chapter 27.
And you shall make an altar of shittim wood, 5 cubits long, and 5 cubits broad, and the altar shall be 4 square, and the height thereof shall be 3 cubits. And you shall make the horns of it upon the 4 corners thereof. His horns shall be of the same, and you shall overlay it with brass. And you shall make his pans to receive his ashes, and his shovels, and his basins, and his flesh hooks, and his fire pans. All the vessels thereof you shall make of brass. And you shall make it for a grate of network of brass, and upon the net shall you make 4 brazen rings in the 4 corners thereof. And you shall put it under the compass of the altar beneath, that the net may be even to the midst of the altar. And you shall make staves for the altar, staves of shittim wood, and overlay them with brass. And the staves shall be put into the rings, and the staves shall be upon the 2 sides of the altar, to bear it. Hollow with boards shall you make it, as it was showed you in the mount, so shall they make it. And you shall make the court of the tabernacle, for the south side southward. There shall be hangings for the court of fine twined linen, of 100 cubits long for one side. And the 20 pillars thereof and their 20 sockets shall be of brass. The hooks of the pillars and their fillets shall be of silver. And likewise for the north side in length there shall be hangings of 100 cubits long, and his 20 pillars and their 20 sockets of brass, the hooks of the pillars and their fillets of silver. And for the breadth of the court on the west side shall be hangings of 50 cubits, their pillars 10, and their sockets 10. And the breadth of the court on the east side eastward shall be 50 cubits. The hangings of one side of the gate shall be 15 cubits, their pillars 3, and their sockets 3. And on the other side shall be hangings 15 cubits, their pillars 3, and their sockets 3. And for the gate of the court shall be hangings of 20 cubits, of blue and purple and scarlet and fine twined linen, wrought with needlework. And their pillars shall be 4, and their sockets 4. All the pillars round about the court shall be filleted with silver. Their hooks shall be of silver, and their sockets of brass. The length of the court shall be 100 cubits, and the breadth 50 everywhere. And the height of 5 cubits of fine twined linen, and their sockets of brass. All the vessels of the tabernacle in the service thereof, and all the pins thereof, and all the pins of the court shall be of brass.
Wherever you are, make it T. Truth Frequency Radio.
Hello and welcome to the Revolutionary Radio Project here on TFR. Thank you guys so much for joining us this evening. I don't know what it's like where you live out there, but boy, it's cold here. And that's saying something here in Texas. It doesn't typically get very cold, but either that or I've just been here for too long. I've been living here since 2003, and perhaps my cold tolerance isn't what it used to be when I lived up in Massachusetts, but man, it's cold here. this evening. So anyway, I'm excited to get started with this evening's broadcast. My guest is Andy Hoy, and I got a book here that he sent to me a while back. It's called The House of El Shaddai by Andrew L. Hoy, God's Dwelling Place Reconsidered. And it's a really nice, if you can see this, those who are watching on YouTube, hardcover book with it's all full color with illustrations and everything. And I was like, man, as soon as I got this book, we put it as a centerpiece on our living room table. For anybody that comes over our house, they'll see that book there, and certainly brings up some good discussion. And I've been, ever since I got the book, been thinking, man, I gotta get Andy on so we can continue this dialogue. And Zen had to cancel this evening. He couldn't be with us for our usual study of the book of Genesis, so we're taking a rain check. We may go ahead and do a show on YouTube or something, or just pick up on his show next Thursday on TFR. One way or another, we'll be back on that study soon. He just couldn't do it this evening, so sort of a last-minute thing. I called, texted with Andy, like, hey, can you do it tonight? He's like, yeah, sure. I'm like, all right, awesome. So it is my privilege to bring Andy Hoy back on to the Revolutionary Radio Project. Hey, Andy, how you doing, man?
Doing all right, Rob. How are you doing?
Doing good. Yeah, it's been a while.
Cold.
Yeah, what's it? Where are you living now?
Wisconsin.
Wisconsin. It's cold up there too, huh?
Yeah, probably under 10 right now, I guess so.
It's colder there, under 10. Yeah, we're somewhere between 20 and 30 here. It's below freezing here, but which doesn't typically happen too often in Texas. So people just aren't used to it here, but. Yeah, that's you guys up north are probably like, yeah, shut up. You've had a lot more cold weather than we've had, that's for sure. So, yeah, man, excited to have you on. It's been a while. You've been on the program a few times before, but just for people who are new here and not familiar with who you are and your work, if you could give us a little bit of a review of your background, a little bit about yourself and your experience and what led you into doing the Project 314 thing in the first place.
Sure. As Rob said, my name is Andrew Hoy. I'm a engineer and founder of Project 314. Project 314 in a nutshell is all about tabernacle rediscovery, research, and restoration. And I founded this project right after my accidental rediscovery of the Exodus Tabernacle, which I proved to be a dome structure, again, based on the pi constant. I found the pi constant in the book of Exodus and said, this is interesting, and what does this mean? And looked at rearranging some of the parts, the curtains, and voila, I realized that it hasn't been represented as intended for well over 2,000 years.
Now, that has obviously got to be a controversial thing. There's so many people, I mean, that are really locked into the rectangular box model out in the wilderness. I mean, if you look at any textbook or any illustrated Bible or, go to Israel, that's all you're going to see. You're going to see this rectangular box thing with lots of layers of cloth on the top of it and whatnot. And, as a Hebrew scholar yourself and as a structural engineer, as I recall the story, you're looking at that and going, well, I mean, a box is the least structurally sound thing you can make. And wait a minute, it looks like they're adding tent pegs and ropes and things that aren't in the itemized shopping list that Yahuwah gave to Moses and Bezalel as they were, constructing this thing. And, of course, Torah tells you specifically, do not add to and do not subtract from the Torah, the 5 books of Moses. And here's one of the most important things in the Torah, right? The tabernacle, the dwelling place of Yahuwah himself. And they're adding stuff. So walk us through that a little bit as what was your thought process when you're looking at the text, you're looking at the models, and with your own background and experience, what went through your head that made you say, wait a minute, something's off here? Yeah,
I guess just as a point, I don't really consider myself a Hebrew scholar. I'm more of a hobbyist, but I did spend time in Israel learning Hebrew at university and other institution. But and for the record, I'm also a mechanical engineer where we do studies on structures, but as far as that being a particular specialty, but I've had enough statics and strengths and materials courses and all that to do this. I mean, it's the same math, same methods that we would use, but again, it's just a matter of genuine specialty. But so I wanted to set the record straight. But yeah, getting into the design, we get kind of conditioned just seeing this. I call it the shoebox, very affectionately, because that's what the thing looks. You can maybe call it a saltine box, maybe. Perhaps a Winnebago. It looks a little bit like a Winnebago as far as the aspect ratio, the proportion. But really, once you start to realize what they have done, it's just because they were very indifferent and lazy when it came to assembling the curtains. These fabrics that everyone thinks it's like, oh, they're no big deal. Actually, what the Hebrew refers to at Exodus 26:1 is ma'aseh chashav, which is basically a thoughtful work. These curtains are actual engineered parts, and people get bored of maybe me talking about curtains, but I have art scroll material here, Ramban and all this. Oops, it's these guys, they really don't spend time talking about the curtains. And why? Because they don't understand them and they don't give them the due respect. So from that, everything just unfolds in a really bad way for them, and they're trying to force a paradigm, and they make the translation then match the paradigm. So this is where it gets really really atrocious. That and it is terrible engineering. The way that you'd shape this, the way that you allocate materials, none of it corresponds with reality or history or cultures or anything like that. So just dogma.
Well, and the other thing, when you're looking at all the multiple layers of cloth on there, Torah is very specific about issues of mold. Like that becomes a problem. And it would seem to me that if you've got multiple layers of cloth on top of each other, if things get wet out there, between just the elements and wind and rain and things like that, and sharp corners and the fabric on the corners rubbing in the wind as the box is shaking, and just the level of mold they would have to deal with. I mean, it seems like you'd always have to be shaking that thing out, laying out the fabric to dry all the time. I mean, the more I looked at your model, the more practical sense it made, just in terms of things like that. Was that some of the things that you were thinking about as well?
Well, not initially, but getting into this idea of what this is all about, this design and the roof in particular, that is where I started with this, is looking at the corners, looking at the connections of everything. How are these things fastened to the structure? Are they just draped over? Are they pulled over? Are they tensioned? I mean, you have to make some sort of decision. And what you'll see, I challenge anyone to crank up a Google image search right now and type in tabernacle and see all the different ways. They can't agree on anything, but the fact that it looks like a box and it's in this boxy courtyard. These are the only things that the scholars agree on with this. And if you start looking at this issue, a double layer leather roof, what sense does that make? Would it be water be seeping through the seams? I do joke about calling this design a shoebox, but there are a couple other variants. Some of them do present it as an A-frame, and then they add magical different materials in order to make that A-frame, so it's pitched like a more conventional like an A-frame type tent. And so, that's as practical as it is. It's like, okay, well, how does the text describe that? Well, it doesn't describe it that way. Mm-hmm. And so this goes back to they're trying to interpret what they don't understand, and they don't understand because they didn't they didn't listen to it right. This is one big game, as Simon says, except for Simon is not Simon. It's El Shaddai. El Shaddai says to Moses, do it this way. And it just, the lack of following these very, very exacting instructions is what's got them all turned upside down.
Well, and that's a really good point that I keep running into with my studies and my frustration constantly when I listen to otherwise, what I consider to be brilliant scholars out there, when they it's like, here's what the text says. Anybody can read it for themselves. We have the online tools that you can use to read the Hebrew, look in the Hebrew, look at the meaning of the word, the Greek and stuff like that. And they'll write everything off they do all these tap dance routines about, well, the Bible's not really about this. It's theological messaging, and it's poetic. It's all poetic. It's allegorical, metaphorical, doctrine of accommodation. I'm like, does anybody believe the Bible anymore? Like, that's what I don't believe in the Mandela effect, but I have this strange memory as a child growing up being taught in church that I should take the Bible literally. My entire life I heard that, and now when I try to do that, everybody's calling me a heretic, calling me all kinds of stuff, and it's like, I'm just reading what it says here. And you've got to probably run into this yourself, where who are you, right? I mean, thousands of years, scholars have believed this, the hubris, you must be like, who do you think you are? And you're like, look, I'm just a dude reading the Bible, man. This is what it says.
I find, Rob, that the ignorant people are very polite. And by that, I mean to say that they don't have the courage or the knowledge base to come and challenge this. And I'll say this, put this out there right here and now. Any pastor, rabbi, whichever, whoever, you want to go toe to toe on this, on all these details. Any day I'll do it, one eyelid tied behind my back, and
cue the Rocky music. Let's go.
So they have no idea what they're getting into, and most of the time, who looks at this, pastors, rabbis. Would you go hire a rabbi to work as an electrician to wire your house? Would you want a pastor, working on the, your grading plan or your framing for your attic? I mean, this is where they haven't acknowledged their knowledge limitations and just yielded expertise to someone who's technical. And instead, again, it gets back into this. Well, who did you know? And this goes all the way back to Josephus' time. So. The very first time I presented in 2015, that was one of the questions right out of the gate, right out of the hole. Like, how come the Jews don't know it, or Jews don't say it? I actually went to Israel. I guess is part of this project. I spent 6 weeks there, and in all that time, I didn't. That's since I was living there, since the discovery. I made the discovery after I was living there, but for that, spending 6 weeks and not having anyone, being able to challenge or to refute me, and I brought like a 5-page set of drawings in Hebrew. This set that this is. What I gave to Rob early on. Oh, this is it's not coming through with the. Let me try this way. Yep.
Close enough to the key.
the chroma key is not liking that. But anyway, a drawing set that I had sent to you, Rob. I had a version of that just as all in pure Hebrew, and I'm like, Tirei yesh po yeriyot, yesh po kereshim, and they're just nodding their head, yes, because. My bumpy Hebrew, they're still catching it, and they're acknowledging all these parts that I'm saying, and like after I walk them through that, sometimes they'll go, and then the ones who are a little bit uncertain think I got something going maybe, they end up going to say, well, you just ask my rabbi, and then. It's like, what, you send me on this wild goose chase, and then you talk to their rabbi. It's like, well, I don't know. I'm not a subject matter expert. Let's kick the can further down the road. So it's just the scholarship when it comes to the tabernacle is laughable. I stopped in just about every bookstore that I could when I was in Israel looking for books on the tabernacle. I found 4 and I brought them home. And they really don't focus on it. The Torah portions that they read for the liturgical Jewish reading cycles of the Bible, they cover the tabernacle. That is 1/25 approximately of their entire liturgical year. So that kind of amounts to 2 weeks a year, and from that, do they specialize on that? No. You find, shelves and shelves of books on other things, and quite possibly the temple. They tend to like the temple better than the tabernacle because, it's Judah's glory. Is what the temple was. That was their heyday. Whereas, technically the tabernacle, well, we're slaves, we're living in a desert, we don't like that so much. So, there's not reminiscing of the glory days of the tabernacle as much, even though those were the greater glory days. So that's hard for them to get in their mind, I guess. So
as I understand it, and as I remember the story, you're looking at the curtains. You're looking at all these models. And you're like, something's not right here. I mean, they're adding stuff, and all kinds of differences from what Moses was shown something. I believe he was shown probably the model of the earth, frankly, but he was shown something in the heavenlies that he was told to emulate here on earth with very specific instructions that he gave with an itemized shopping list, and which means you don't add to it, don't subtract from it. This is the Lego box set, right? These are all the parts. This is all you need. And as you're looking at all these other models, you're like, well, they got more than what the text says right here, and you're scratching your head. And as I remember the story, you're like, well, what is the deal here? Where did they miss it? And you're looking at the description of the curtains, and it says to connect the curtains, but it's not specific. It doesn't say, like, they're long rectangular strips, but do you connect them at the long end? If you do, you get a rectangular box. Or what if you connected them at the short end? Like, is that sort of the, almost like childlike thought process going, well, what if I just did it this way? And and then boom, like this 6-story high dome tent pops up.
Yeah, numerically, that's kind of where I'd started off. I by no means set out one day to say, hey, I'm going to re-engineer the tabernacle because I'm an engineer and I'm smarter than all these people. Frankly, it was so far below my radar, I didn't give a rip about it. And I say that, in a little bit of embarrassment, but definitely a matter of confession. And I think a lot of people can relate to that because it's like, well, what does this matter? They built this funny tent in the desert, big deal, And this really, I guess, like to get into the why here at some point of why all this matters. People are like, oh, it's just the shape. It doesn't really matter. It just was that way, and that's how it was. And who cares if it's round, because it's not a salvation issue. And let's move on to something more important. This is so typical of the attitudes that I encounter. But going back into this issue and the question of curtains, I will go and correct myself in that. When I first was on your show, there's just so many details in the text that are small that you don't really fully grasp. And I'm obviously EFL. I'm not ESL, English first language, not English second language, which frankly gives me an advantage when looking at the Hebrew because I gotta break it down. It's all getting into the granular things. It's like. What are similes and idioms and things like that. So I'm rolling up my sleeves and I'm picking apart each word. And it's like, well, what does this word really mean? And what does this word really mean? Some of these words aren't really used in the rest of the Bible, the Hebrew words, that is. And getting back to the curtains. So the curtains it refers to is kaitsona. Kaitsona is the term where you're to be joining these curtains, and if you look at this idea of kites, this is where we get our English word cuts from, which comes from the Hebrew root katsatz, and kaitsona. I believe that to be referring to the cut edges of the tabernacle, and a lot of times if you take a look at where they're going with that curtain detail, they basically translate that as hem or seam or something like that. It's like, no, it's not the hem or seam. And if you do loom weaving, you have like a long, section of, let me see where my camera frame is here. You got basically two posts that you span string in between. You weave it back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And so from there, that's called the warp. That's the longer fabric stretch. And from that, they run a shuttle block back and forth. Kind of like a serpentine. That's that shuttle. That's we get the warp and the weft. So that when you weave it back and forth, those are the edges that are not cut, because otherwise your fabric would all fray. Okay, so this is basic loom weaving. So, people who are illiterate, who are, weaving in India or China or wherever by hand, or Egypt, they have a better understanding of kite sona than do these scholars who are trying to pick at the text. So, again, I'm standing correcting myself, but I was asking the question at the time, well, which way do these go? And when it comes to that, that arrangement, I first began because I saw just the raw numbers there, because I was putting it in a spreadsheet, wondering how these overlap, because there's two curtain sets, and you can kind of see behind me in the in the backdrop picture here. We've got a colored set, and there's 10 of these colored sets, and then beyond that there's the white set that's all around a circumferential courtyard. So there's a set of 11, and there's a set of 10. The 11 ones are the ones that those are the ones that add up to pi, or the 314 number, and the colored ones, there's just 10 of those, and the 10 are listed first. And so, because you got an offset between the lengths as well as the quantities, so you got 10 that measure 28 long, and then you've got 11 that measure 30 long. And so I'm looking at this, wondering exactly how these overlap. And this is where, if you go back to your Google image search and you start looking at these tabernacle models of how do they have this represented, what's supposedly 2 layers of curtains. If you have this image up here, another second, Rob, we've got that outer courtyard set, which measures 314 cubits in circumference. That is described as being put al-tzadi, it's over the side, or around the side, and they actually put that on the roof of the tabernacle. And this is one of their, it's the second of 4 layers in their mind, so you've got these two layers of fabric which are dimensioned, and they make an assembly. And again, it talks about making these curtains all the same, each of them the same. So if each of them has loops on the outer edge, and I think King James, as I recall, it's referring to the outmost edge, or the uttermost edge, or something like that. So if we're looking at reaching out like in a stretch direction, if you've got loops on both edges, and you're supposed to connect it to an adjacent curtain, well, by all means, that has to either be a polygon or a circle. And so this is just one of these little details that no one really thinks about or pays attention to. But when you make yourself out of these curtains a rectangular swatch that you want to use as a roof, now you have the edges where, if you're butting them all together, then the 2 on the very ends, they don't have any place to attach to. So we're left in this whole, how do we make use of these loops if we're supposed to make the curtains all the same length, and make both edges 50 loops for interconnecting to the adjacent curtain? It has to be a polygon, or it has to be a circle. That's simple.
That's so cool. That's so fascinating, and yet it's so simple. Like you said, you're looking at it like, it's got to be. That's what it is. We're about 2 minutes before we go to break. Before we go to break, why don't you tell everybody where they can get your information, where they can visit your website and get your book and stuff like that. And then when we come back from the break, we'll talk about the why, because that's real important. Like, why are we even talking about this? Why is this important? So why don't you tell people where they can get your stuff?
Yep, the why is extremely huge, and it's something that have underplayed in the times past, and I really want to emphasize that a lot. But you can get my book at it's basically project314.org. There's a shop page. You see a little cart up on the top and everything. So that's one place to get it. I've also got that bundled with an upcoming webinar that I'm starting as of this Sunday. But let's see. Apart from that, there's a company that starts with A that tends to hate free speech that I'm uninclined to mention at this point. So you could probably get it at Barnes & Noble. I'm sure you can. Actually, it's available in many countries of the world. You can order it direct out of Australia, New Zealand, in Europe, and in Asia. There's printers all over. So this is it's a lower volume print on demand type thing right now. But hopefully that'll change as people awaken to this truth here. So.
Yeah, fantastic. And for those who are on YouTube, they can see this. Here I got the book right here in front of me. Again, it's nice, good size tabletop book, full color, hardcover, and inside. I mean, this is. Did you do all the layout and this stuff? This is just like beautiful.
Yes, I did indeed.
Yeah, this is very well laid out, very artistic, and got all kinds of diagrams on how to put it together and the measurements and stuff. So something to definitely check out, project314.org. And we're about ready to go to break here. We come back from the break, we'll talk about why is this important? Why should we be concerned with this at all? So stand by. We'll see you back in just a few minutes. And we're back on the Revolutionary Radio Project. I am your host, Rob Skiba, and right before the break, we were talking with my guest, Andy Hoy, about the tabernacle in the wilderness of the Torah that describes the Israelites were in the wilderness and they were to build a house for God, basically, to dwell in, and whether or not it was a shoebox, rectangular type structure, or a 6-story high dome tent, circular dome tent, which frankly is a whole lot more impressive. Let me just put it that way. When Andy, when you first started telling me about this, and when I first started looking at your models and stuff, I had an office space that I was renting at the time, and it had a 6-story high parking garage. And so, right after the first time I spoke with you, I was going to my office and I pull into this parking garage. I'm looking at how high this thing is. I'm going, wow, imagine this was a circular dome tent instead of a parking garage. That's how tall the thing would be. And somebody in the chat room was mentioning that they were taught that the tabernacle was laid out like a cross. I've not heard that the tabernacle itself was laid out as a cross, but rather that the formation of the tribes of Israel to the north, south, east, and west, the dimensions, if you were to look at the number of people there, happen to line out like a cross. And they would typically show the encampment of the Israelites around the rectangular tent in the middle, which if you were coming up on the scene, you really wouldn't even see. It wouldn't be that much higher than the heads of the people and maybe their own personal tents. It'd be lost in the mix. However, if you put a 6-story high circular dome tent in the center of the formations, that's going to stand out, especially if it's got this fire pillar going right down through the middle of it. That would have been something that would strike fear, awe, and wow into everybody that saw it. And I once heard you say something to the effect of, don't expect people who are unable to discern the shape of the tabernacle to be even remotely qualified to teach you of its significance. That's a powerful statement. So I'd love to turn it over to you and hear what you have to say as far as why is this important? What's the significance of this? Why should we care?
You've been to like a Six Flags theme park or something like that?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, so you remember why they got like Wile E. Coyote and bugs and all that? Remember where we parked?
Right. So where we parked.
Yeah, you're so there's no parking in the tabernacle, but outside that, you certainly could be using it for orientation. Now, with it towering over the land, El Shaddai is again one of the names for God. It's loosely translated as God Almighty. But the word Sadeh is the word for field, and Hasadeh and Shaddai, both of them, the Hebrew gematria is 314, which is kind of so with every number a letter representing a number, those are the numbers that equals. So you could also say it's the God of the field. Is kind of an idea that it's being conveyed there, but. With a cross layout, I know Chuck Missler has presented that, but I don't know if he was the originator of that idea that this whole courtyard, or that not the courtyard, but the encampment with the populations, that it took on a cross shape. And it's like, okay, well, that's interesting and cute, but I seem to recall a guy named Abraham, and there was a promise in Genesis 12, that your descendants will be like as numerous as the stars in the sky. Well, if you look at the stars of the sky, well, first of all, you look outside and you spin your head around, put on a swivel, and They're every which direction. And the same thing goes here. If you're going to really lay out an encampment like a cross, I mean, talk about bad logistics. It's like who has to park way in the back? People don't park like that. They park as close as they can to the main attraction. I mean, that's one point of absurdity. But getting into this issue of the why and the what this is all about, let me just say we usually refer to this as a tabernacle. Where does this come from? This is from a Latin word, getting into the idea of taberna, which is where we get an English word, of course, tavern. So it's like this is the language that we associate with this. But in Hebrew, you either have Mishkan or Ohel Moed. And Mishkan is basically like saying a dwelling place, which is why I have the book titled, subtitled, Restoring God's. There we go again with this, where it's not taking into that there. I can't put this in any clever angle to.
I can show it on my side here.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I had to try again, but so that idea of God's dwelling place restored, I really wanted to use that language because the idea of tabernacle, it already conveys that silly shoebox, because who else uses this in English? Yeah, you want to go over to your tabernacle later on tonight? I tell you, who uses, I guess the Mormons do, right? The Mormon Tabernacle Choir. But apart from that, apart from religious context, the only thing we had to relate to is tavern. Which is kind of usually a dark and dingy, kind of shady place, So the idea of a booth is another thing that taberna conveys. So just getting into this idea of Mishkan, which is dwelling place, which again is why I have the cover subtitled the way I do, or Ohel Moed. So Ohel is tent, and Moed is the idea of the feast or the seasons or divine appointments. So everyone is of course interested in going back to these Hebrew holidays and the feasts of the Lord, so to speak. Now with these feasts, the Ohel Moed itself is mentioned more than the Moed or the Moedim themselves. So we have to ask why. Why is this important? There's no evidence of Israel doing the feasts until this tent is built. After they come out with the legitimate, the full rehearsal Passover, there's no mention of them keeping any feasts until this thing is established. So that should be of some note. Let's see. And as far as the why, so going into this, why this is important. Well, first of all, these people, and like you said, these people who are unable to discern the shape of the tabernacle, telling us of its importance. I can't accept their explanations for this for a number of reasons. But why is this important? Because he said so. Which divine words do we find in Scripture where we say those are unimportant? Can you think of any? I mean, can you imagine standing up in the middle of a church service, someone's quoting, it says, "Thus saith the Lord," da 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 da, and just saying, yeah, that's really unimportant. Could you imagine one of the Israelites coming, from Egypt and saying, "Oh, I don't think this thing is important at all," and this is where we've transitioned to as a people of the book. This is where our religions have taken us. And this very idea, this is why they got liberated from Egypt. It's not let my people go so they don't have to deal with the taskmasters. It's let my people go so that they may have a festival to me in the wilderness. And guess what word is used for festival? Chag. So we have the Chag Sameach is a happy holiday in Hebrew, but this idea of Chag, which is the same root as hug, getting into the idea of circle and circuit. This is the thing that is being hinted at even in their first mention to Pharaoh of let my people go. So that they can do this chag, this festival, this circular thing. So I think that's kind of a powerful beginning of this. But getting into other reasons, as far as what the project is all about. So, it's about research and restoration. So we have to do research in order to understand what it is that we are to, commanded to make and commanded to restore. There is nothing else in Scripture where it's like, thus saith the Lord, build a synagogue, but thus saith the Lord, build a church. Thus saith the Lord, build a coffee shop for your small group. None of these things are in the thus saith the Lord string. Even the temple, frankly, is one that's, this is David's idea. He's like, oh, I feel so bad that it's in a tent, and what does he hear back? He's like, it's like, this is okay. This is my idea. I've been dwelling, since when have I ever asked the people who are shepherding my people Israel, build me a house of cedar? But David was really intent on doing it. So, I mean, the Levites and the priests were being naughty before David, and, they lost the Ark of the Covenant, with the Philistine thing. The Ark of the Covenant was actually out of the tabernacle for 80 years. So there were some messed up things, but in general, the tabernacle stood longer in Israel than the temples did, or when I say stood longer, between the wilderness and is 480 years is how long this thing made it. So everyone thinks that this is the wilderness tabernacle, and it wasn't intended as the wilderness tabernacle. It was intended as more. So why build this, or why think about building it? Why think about restoring this? Well, a couple reasons. When I say a couple, I got 10 of them laid out. I don't know. Can I throw up my screen share?
Yeah.
Rob?
Yeah, just be aware that people are listening on the radio too, so you have to describe whatever you want to show.
Sure thing. So if you go to project314.org, we have. I need to click on something, don't I?
Yeah, you got to do the screen share.
There we go. All right. And can you see my screen?
I can.
Okay, so this is my homepage with the little ad for the up and coming webinar. But if we scroll down to here, we've got the Tabernacle Manifesto, and this manifesto I get into calling for revolution, going back to the Torah, and getting into the very idea of repentance, having to do with the turning and everything. Let me just go to the actual list. I've got them kind of bullet pointed here. So number one, we get in this obedience thing. So if we're to love God, love man, love is the number one command. Obey. So if we're to obey, thus saith the Lord. He said, build this thing. I can't recall any point in time where he recanted that and say, well, let's dismantle this and do something else. You don't see that in the text. Another thing is getting the idea of reputation, and making restitution for all of this reputation that's been run through the mud for so many years, because everyone's been thinking it is that the Mishkan, or the Ohel Moed, is just a shoebox in a crude and unelegant and ridiculous thing. So if his name is there, if this is something that is part of his place, his identity, his presence, is this something we want to misrepresent? I think not. Getting into the issue of legacy, Solomon took this thing down in conjunction with erecting the new temple. So getting into this thing, it talks about how these commandments are like everlasting things. So if we are to, again, take the tabernacle seriously, just think about this. This thing would have been a monument. It's a testimony to Israel being liberated from Egypt. This is their forefathers. Year after year, generation after generation, they point to this. Where's that from, Dad? Oh, let me tell you about this story here. I mean, you want to talk about Passover Haggadah? With the Haggadah with the Haggadah with the tabernacle would have been a very, very different teaching. Another good reason for restoring it would be outreach. If we think in terms of, our testimony and our faith and how these things, if we think these matter, if we think, God's word matters, you get a bunch of people say, hey, let's start restoring this. Case in point, I'd like to bring up, Ken Ham is spent, and his team, his people, all the Christian build there, they spent $100 million on a boat that won't float for a flood that won't happen. The tabernacle would probably cost less than that if you made it with the silver and gold to full scale. As for example, I'm looking at crawl, walk, run here, but anyway, the idea of community. There's nothing I think more important to community is having this as a common place. We get into the idea of a holiday tool and timepiece. I've got an article about 12 pages that's on my website as well, talking about how the tabernacle, I believe, to have served in the capacity of a calendar clock and a timepiece. To use this as a sundial, also being able to use it to determine days of year, latitude, all that sort of thing.
Wow.
We get into the idea of a hands-on education. We have people who don't know. There's a video going around on YouTube or that was out years ago. A guy walking around California, asking people how to differentiate between a left-handed and right-handed screwdriver. So there's people who really don't have any tech savvy, hands-on knowledge, etc. We get into the idea of sacrifice. So, everyone likes to think, the temple is described as a house of prayer for all nations. Well, if you take a look at the Almighty's response to Solomon, what did he say at that time? He said, I have heard your prayer and have accepted this place as a place for sacrifices. This is a very particular thing. I'm actually going to be dealing a little bit in that sacrifice topic on my webinar up and coming for one of the sessions. Also have Revelation. The amount of shadow pictures and imagery in this thing is just phenomenal. And again, I talk about some of that. And the last is revolution. As far as bringing about a different, when I say a different form of religion, really. Kind of back to the days of old. Those are kind of my top 10. As far as reasons why. Reasons why vary from person to person. But when we talk about Revelation, let me. I have a book here. If I turn the screen share back off. There we go. This is a book. This one disappearing on me too. Okay. The Tabernacle: Shadows of the Messiah. That's the title of this book. Here I've got notes here. From reviewing this in times past, I've got a note. Not a single Exodus 26 text is quoted in this whole thing. So Exodus 26 is describing the entire frame and the coverings for this tabernacle, okay? And this whole book, which goes to 250 some pages, doesn't reference Exodus 26 a single time. Mm-hmm. So what do we have? What are we really looking at here when we want to impose our Christology upon everything? The Jews, I think, will laugh at Christians a lot because it's like, well, you're just making this up to fit your own narrative. And when it comes to the tabernacle in the shoebox, case in point, Rob mentioned the Chuck Missler reference to the cross. Well, look at this; it forms a cross. Okay, yes, it does if you arrange things in an absurd way, and if you have no understanding of the rest of the mechanics and the language and everything. So I have in this book here a note. There are about 500 scripture citations by page 91. I must have been mistaken. 2 of which refer to Exodus 26. That's less than 0.5% that's about the tabernacle, and that's just in that section. So, and then they go on to, of course, talking about the peace offering and the animal sacrifices. We have a similar situation with the rose product here. Can we get this? It looks like it's ghosting a little bit, but you can see there's an altar there. It looks like the guy is actually working with red hot magma at the altar instead of I don't know what. So these things, there are artistic pieces and cartoons, but they're generally really not about the tabernacle. this in this Rose book, they only dedicate about 20% of the book to the tabernacle. If you compare that to the whole House of El Shaddai book, as you recall, Rob, I think I got well over 200 images in there, and they're all pertaining to the tabernacle and comparing it to the shoebox model, which in these other books they just take for granted. So.
Yeah, I'll let me switch over here, put that back up here again, just for people. Check this out. This is a very well done book, man. I can't praise it highly enough. I mean, it's just very well laid out. It's colorful. This must have cost quite a bit to produce, actually.
I actually took a whole bunch of my my concepts from the Rose Guide people. So
yeah, well, they do really good work as far as presentation.
They have nice art. They're artists. Their presentation layout, etc., is really nice. But
yeah. But that's typical where, and this is what frustrates me. Like with regard to like the biblical cosmology debate and creationism, I've had many people that creationists that want to debate me and stuff, and I'm like, okay, let's do it, but my criteria is let's do it from the Bible. I don't want to hear about numbers. I want to hear about Bible. I had one guy tell me how it is mathematically conceivable that 1 + 1 could equal 3, and they give reasons for how that's possible. I'm like, well, all you're doing is proving that you can make math do whatever you want it to do. I don't want to go there. That's not my wheelhouse. My wheelhouse is Scripture. And when I get into debates with these pastors and theologians and creationists, and they'll write books against what I've talked on the topic, and they've published 300, 400, 500-page books, and they give all of maybe 10 pages worth of it to Scripture. I'm going, what are we talking about here? You claim to be a ministry, you claim to be a Christian, you claim to be a creationist, and you spend 99% of the time talking about everything under the sun except the Scriptures. Let's get back to the Bible. So that's why I can really appreciate, your critique of some of those other books that they talk a lot about the tabernacle, but they don't go to the source material that describes the thing. Whereas in your book, I don't know how many pages is your book.
I'm going to say 230 or something like that. No, it's floating around 200. Yeah, right around 200.
So you got 200 pages, and the vast majority of this is all talking about this is what the Bible says, and here's what it looks like, and it's going through it line by line, precept upon precept, analyzing the thing.
Yeah, I do a verse by verse blow by or rundown in that. I've also got another. We'll see if this is offensive to my screen. There we go. I'm calling this one "Exploring God's House." I really don't know why this is not a green cover at all.
Maybe put it in front of your. Okay, yeah. Exploring God's House.
So this is another book that I started on while I was busy kind of trying to get the House of El Shaddai out for review, and also because the House of El Shaddai is a very different book, and it's really targeting your average Christian type who's got nothing but their translations to work from. And so I'm explaining in light of their translations, there's probably about 4 or 5 places that are really translated awkwardly and egregiously and grossly incorrect, and without clearing those log jams, they'll just never get there from here. And that's something that I'm very I try to be very sensitive to, because you get into Bible literalism, and it's all well and good until you put in a translation, and then the arguments appear. And it talks about, and I want to say in Zephaniah like 3:8 or 3:9 or something, it talks about when we as a people will be returning to the holy tongue, or the one tongue, and serve him with one consent. We can't do that as long as we're puttering around in these translations. We'll argue an hour and a half or a day and a half or a year and a half over whether it says in or on. Mm-hmm. And there you shouldn't be confused in the Hebrew, but or on and around, or on and above. There's different prepositions that you could translate them legitimately out of Hebrew in either way, but some of those didn't become context based. But So the problem with it being a biblical literalist is, people want to pretend that King James is divinely inspired, and this is just this is childish absurdity. It's immaturity. It's worse than bad scholarship. It's such a grotesque indoctrination. I'm sure I'll get lots of darts and things shooting at me with no technical proofs of anything. But that's why I'm going through in this book, this House of El Shaddai, getting into the. I'll just try to see if I can get one of these other pages. And there it's not again. I can maybe next break I'll crank some of these things up so I can show the an inside page or two. But this is my work that this is the book that I wanted to write, and it started out much smaller. And I when I say smaller, I don't have a talent always for saying few words.
Neither do I.
And, the proverb too, at least in English, it's translated when words are many, sin is not absent. So who's sin? My sinning when I'm doing a lot of words here, but I'm basically going back to the Hebrew on a verse by verse basis. So like every verse, I'm explaining a little phrase within that verse to say this is specifically what it's referring to, and I basically give a reason why it can't be referring to rectangular and why it is referring to the round. As far as that whole string and configuration, and there's just a lot of little key phrases. So the House of El Shaddai, again, that's the one that's commercially available right now. That one is dead. It's directed at people who are English only. I didn't want to intimidate people, where they thinking like this scary Hebrew font and this is a scholar's book, and I don't want to. I mean, I've got like all those quality control tags to show you, if it's accepted or rejected or needs rework of
All right.
the.
All right, hold that thought.
Okay.
We're going to break. And we're back on the Revolutionary Radio Project. I'm your host, Rob Skiba, and I'm talking with my guest, Andy Hoy. And Andy, right before the break, you were talking about your book, and I guess you got two books there, but the book we've been talking about this evening, The House of El Shaddai, God's Dwelling Place Reconsidered. You were talking about this book being written more for the layman, as opposed to somebody that maybe perhaps doesn't know Hebrew that well or wouldn't consider themselves a Hebrew scholar. So if there's anything more you wanted to say in that regard, go ahead. I know you got cut off there.
Yeah, I did. I brought up the some electronic pages of my Exploring God's House book, which is the work in progress, and this is really again, it's the book that I wanted to write. Right now, it's not edited, reviewed type thing, and so I guess I'm looking for qualified editors, reviewers. I'm also kicking the idea around of making this other book into a kind of an online only through the website, and making this multilingual. And because the layout of it, well, you saw the interior of the House of El Shaddai. It's very tightly packed and very highly organized information. If I just turn that into German, whether they got words that are 15, 20 characters long all the time. It changes all the margins, and it would be real tricky to lay out once that's converted. But the goal is to make Project 314 more international, as far as getting more content translated, to really bring this to all the tribes in the world, in that sense. So again, this idea of tabernacle research and restoration, so restoring it to all the peoples, giving them the ability to research. So I'm going to just go back on the screen share here and put that up. So this is one of the pages, or two of the pages from Exploring God's House, which is the work in progress, and it's showing this 4-layer tent. asking the simple question: did the tent use a 4-layer covering? Showing how they usually arrange it. 2 layers of leather, 2 layers of fabric. Here's the lower one of linen, made of 10 sheets. There's the one above it, made of wool, and that one's made with 11 sheets. So this is just Exodus 26 verse 1. So we've got "Thus saith the King James," and "Thus saith the Hebrew," and we've got King James, of course, is English, Shakespearean, written left to right, and Hebrew written right to left. So anyone who wants to follow along, this is referred to. This is an interlinear Bible. So in between the lines of "Ve'et Mishkan tas eser yeriot sheish mishzar." So if you don't know what that means, well, just look below. "And the tabernacle you shall make," or do, 10 of sheets, cambric sheen, being corded. So this is like an instant, it's like Strong's definitions shunted to you in Hebrew right away. Now, this is from, I would say it's a Westminster sublinear or something like that. But this is from ISA, or Interlinear Scripture Analyzer. I recommend it all the time over, even Blue Letter Bible tends to backfeed translation into their interlinear, and this I find to be a much more literal and very, very helpful tool. I mean, this is just amazing tool. This is a free tool. Please download their stuff and give them some gratuity for this, because this is just an amazing work. It's I can't emphasize that enough. So
what's the tool again? What is it? Is it?
This is Interlinear Scripture Analyzer.
Oh, I think
the
I
name
have
of the website.
Interlinear Scripture Analyzer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've used that before. I hear what you're saying though about various online resources that inject their own bias into their interpretations. Like, for instance, turning rakia or stereoma into expanse, as in air, gas, and the vacuum of space, which is just patently absurd, ridiculous.
There's so many places that the people cheat on the translations, and like I said, this has been the one of the most tamper-free translations I've ever seen in my life, and I usually swear by it, stand by it. And there's a few words where, again, in my book, you could see the what I was doing. I put the Strong's number in there. So here, this is like looking at a PDF on the website. This is going from right to left. So this helps English readers. "And the tabernacle you shall make 10 of sheets," etc. Whereas in my book, I've got this started out going from left to right. But again, this isn't quite available yet, so it's kind of frustrating. But the point I'm trying to make here, Rob, is people get intimidated by the Hebrew and Hebrew study, and they just see it and they lock up and they're terrified. And with these tools, I'm not expecting anyone to start being able to read the letters, but it's 22 letters in an alphabet. You can learn the alphabet by singing a song for a few hours in an afternoon, really. So this gets into the whole thing. It's like, well, if we value the word of God, and it's like, well, this is the word of God, and the English is really not. You see all these parentheses here.
Well, that one,
we've got
whatever you're showing is not the. I can see that what's below that,
okay.
but that particular screen is just a blank.
Okay.
Whatever you're showing there, I can see the template below that, but I can't.
Yeah. I don't know who to blame, if Firefox is to blame on that. I'll just put that aside. But
yeah, I can see that.
That was the Interlinear Scripture Analyzer. That was really it's just a PDF. They have PDF of every page, so you don't actually even need to have the installation of the program. But the program runs on Windows, and they don't have a Mac version yet or whatever. But my point is all this tool is just very practical, and this is the it makes a more or less a mechanical translation, which is just word for word. No need to insert other funky baggage and garbage, in between all this stuff. That's kind of my point. But so this other book here, Here we have shesh mizar, and so we see the Hebrew word shesh with two shins. And how do they twist the strings up? How do they twist the
Oh, wow.
fabric?
Wow.
It seems to make two sheshes. So why is it that the number 6 in Hebrew is associated with this weaving? And I think this is why. Now I can't say that definitively, but so I'm basically deconstructing the shoebox model, and I do this in the House of El Shaddai, which is available right now. These same images are pulled out of that, so I'm basically going from the same image bank anyway. But it talks about these sheets to put them in 2 sets of 5. Well, why 2 sets of 5? Well, on this model, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, because you're joining them all together as one big piece if you do that.
Yeah. If you're just going to try to make a rectangle, why group in a 5 first? But it talks about having a set of 5 and a set of 5. Why? Because you're joining this together to make the one tabernacle, as it describes, or the one mishkan. And so this is literally the dwelling place is established by this polygon, semicircular thing. It's really decagonal. This decagonal shape is what establishes what is called the mishkan, what is called the tabernacle.
So decagonal, is that, because I saw somebody in the chat room saying, how does he deal with the word sides? Where on the north side or what have you, where we encounter words like that like they would say a circle doesn't have a side. So is it because it's a decagonal that it has sides, or is it a different word?
Let me just find this. This is raw comedy, and I'm happy that someone asked this question. But what I'm gonna do is I've got a table. I don't know if it's in this one book or if it's in it might be in both, but they basically translate just in this section alone. If I was to do a reverse lookup on the word side, SIDE, and I look up all the English occurrences, and you could do that with like an eSword program. I'm sure a lot of your listeners use eSword. If you use the King James Concordance tool or do a search, you could type in the word SIDE in English and do a search. And from what I recall, there was like more than 30 different Hebrew words that they translate into the word side. Now, in this parsha alone, in the Teruma parsha, which is Exodus 25 through 27 roughly, there are 7 different words that are translated as side, SIDE, and this SIDE word, it's only once where it really belongs, translated in that, and that's today. So the Hebrew word, ironically, the only legitimate one that they translate as sides, they actually put the curtains on the roof. So. I don't know. I think that's comical, but they translate all sorts of different words as side. The Hebrew word for rib, salah, they translate as side. The word for thigh, yirach or yirachtaim, or they translate that as side. So when you start to, in a sense, kind of neuter the language and just butcher the language, well, sure, anything's possible. So you're talking more about the courtyard. And I put it this way to people: if you remember those compasses that sat on top of your grandpa's dash in his car, where he's probably got one of those bubble compasses. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that has it might be round, but you could say it has 2 sides. You could say it has 4 sides. You could divide it in as many pieces as you want. But circle even has an inside and an outside. But a north side and a south side, this is how we navigate. Go south a few hundred yards. You mean due south? No, southwest. It's still the south side. If you're on the south side of a house, it's referring to a big area that's all fanned out. And so if you want to think, and this is where people go with this, and I'm aggravated to the point of amused almost, or I just want to pick somebody up and shake them, because they'll pick up words like this and they'll fixate on it. It's like a beagle going after the scent of a rabbit or a raccoon. And once they take that scent, they follow it to the bitter end, even if it involves their own death. So they're so committed, so dogmatic in this whole thing. Oh, my English Bible says sides right here. The first presentation I gave, there's the word corners in there as well. It talks about, joining to the corners of the frame or something like that, or actually it's of the one ring. So show me where the one ring is on the shoebox tabernacle. But this guy thought he had me. He thought he caught me at an aha moment. He brings up this. This is back in 2015. He's got a well-worn, onion skin King James Bible, and he's like, oh, look, it says corners right here, and it's just like, it's actually, the word is makaitzot, and it's not, the word kaitzai within there, the root, it's actually spelled with an ayin, which actually is representative of an eye, which is a circular thing, and it alludes to the idea of a segmented circle, really. And so, but this is where they take their English and they think, well, it must have been translated good because it was good enough for my daddy, it was good enough for my grandma, and so forth and so on, and it's good enough for my pastor. And my pastor says that the King James is inspired. I'm sure that you can make reference to a few other Bible teachers of the day who are running around saying that the King James is inspired more than the Hebrew.
Dude, I've had people, I'm not gonna mention any names, but a name that everybody would know, that has actually said that he would correct the Hebrew and Greek to the King James. I'm like, dude, do you realize the Bible was not? It was written from Hebrew, Greek, and Aramaic into English. How are you gonna? How does that even make sense to an intellectually, somebody who has letters after their name that goes by the name Doctor? How does that even make any sense to you? I would correct the Hebrew. I would correct the original source information to the translation. Like what?
So here's a fun one for you, Rob. King James version, of course. Which one's inspired? Oh, it's the 1611.
Yeah,
right.
Which nobody's quoting these days.
Yeah. So what happened before and what happened after? We don't know.
Right.
And I'm not saying that there's not some interesting nuance that appears in some of these things from time to time, but who decided to park it there? Who's the inspired person who's got thus saith the Lord power and authority that was given this permission and again authority of declaration on this. Mm-hmm. And all the pastors who want to take it farther, it's just a really weird, creepy, dogmatic thing. And
it's a cult.
What about all those earlier versions? Well, those were almost divinely inspired. Well, what about the ones after 1611? Well, not divinely inspired anymore. They changed it, and they start citing all sorts of other absurdities. And at the end of the day, it's like, look, guys, just stop being so lazy and stop being so stubborn, and just do a little study yourself and just open your minds and take a look, because until you do that, you really don't know. And all you're doing, are you willing to bet your eternal soul on the King Jimmy? I mean, some people are so insecure that, or they have such a dark view of the Almighty that they think they're entitled to a perfect translation, and they think they're entitled to pick it without having any knowledge of it. And it's just such a weird thing. I can't. I use King James in here because I don't have to worry about citation and copyright. That's part of the reason. Then the other reason is, frankly, the King James. It's better than a lot of other English Bibles. I'll give you that. Mm-hmm. But I'm not gonna pretend it's this divinely inspired writ. Mm-hmm. And the people who do so, they're in for a rude awakening if they're going to study this idea, this book out. And you'll see. I've got this stuff in interlinear. If they just go to an interlinear and look for the insertions, it's just.
Well, insertions is a really good key word, because one of the arguments that I study from the King James. I was raised on King James. I don't really have a problem with the King James. I have a problem with King James only people. Those are the people I have a severe problem with. But they'll look at all these other translations and say, "See, all these other Bible translations took this word out, and they took this phrase out, and they took this verse out." I'm like, the better question might be, what did the King James put in? Because when you go down that route and you see how much that was inserted, wow, and some things is a big deal, but who cares, right? But there's other things that, like entire doctrinal, points of view have been based on things that are inserted by 1611 translators. So that's where it becomes a problem. But anyway, I don't want to go on a whole show ranting on that.
Yeah. I should stop. But in the particulars of the tabernacle, you've got like the idea of a when I say a column or a stand or a standing thing. So the Hebrew, you have a mod or a med, and you have in Hebrew the Jews the Amidah. So these pillars of the tabernacle are described as standing, but they're also in the proper model, they're actually leaning. They're leaning towards the center, which is consistent with the Jewish prayer known as the Amidah. So I think that's really funny. And the closer you get in, the more that they're leaning. But the fact that they're leaning, guess what? They're still standing. So when they want to take a word and says, well, it says pillars right here, or columns or posts, we have all these really similar English words. It's like, well, which one do you pick and why? And then getting into the literalism, we're like, oh, you can't take we can take the Bible literally unless there's what do you call it, similes or metaphors, the as or the like. In Hebrew that is a form of construction of the it is a syntax and a preposition that they have these. But the bigger truth is that when verbs are so defining of the nouns, to talk about the pillars being a standing thing as opposed or a stand or something upon which something stands, we understand that verb that's the thing that's driving the meaning or conveying the meaning. And if we want to be dogmatic with our English nouns, that gets us in a lot of trouble, and people have no idea how far gone they are because of that. I've got cases in this, cited in the book, I think in the House of El Shaddai even, talking about where they're using the word to tent, and they say for a tent or for the tent, and it doesn't say the. There's a definite article in Hebrew of the, but it doesn't appear there, and they're using the preposition to or for, in front of it. So is it talking about a noun? Is it to tent something? Or is it for a tent or for the tent? And so they get lost in little spots like that, and they translate it one way, and they do that with the courtyard curtains. It talks about them being hangings, and is it a hanger or a hanging? Okay, there's a big difference. My shirt goes on a hanger and then becomes a hanging. And so they get lost in that little bit of language nuance because they weren't paying attention. Again, Big Game of Simon says, and this string of text goes like 6 chapters long. Thus saith the Lord, da 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 da. Listen to the end, pay attention, take notes, go back, review, and they want to just go from one sentence construction bits and bad presumed paradigms, and they want to run from there and embrace those things so tightly that they just won't let go. So this whole thing, it's mistranslated that bad in a few spots that just leaves people really disoriented. I have one other book thing here, and again, I'm this is another one available on my website. This is just a the House of El Shaddai. This is a workbook. The workbook is just set up with a lot of questions, and the questions are designed to get the reader to think and to think through this, because this exegesis isn't hard if you know a few of the language nuances that derail us. And so in constructing the questions, I've got these questions constructed in a way that I'm helping them navigate through the exegesis, which has no picture. So that book is like not a picture book that you go by. I mean, my other book is like gobs of pictures, but anyone who likes a puzzle, wants to figure it out for themselves, get the workbook and just try it, work with me, and follow that line of questions. It's like 200 questions or something like that in that book, I think, that just try to direct you into the proper questions.
Well, that is so important, and I had to do that myself with a number of topics. Is about 10 years ago I realized just how much, I don't want to knock the people who I learned under growing up. I think that many of these people were good, godly men and women who meant well, who just maybe didn't understand, quite right. But we are all taught things, and we have this, I imagine, like this big whiteboard in our head that has all kinds of stuff scribbled on it that people have taught us. And good 10 years ago or so, I realized, after one thing after another, looking through the scriptures for myself, going, wait a minute, something's wrong here, that I finally had to take a step back and just, like, metaphorically speaking, say, Father, I'm taking an eraser to the big whiteboard in my head. I'm going to start all over again. Just erase the whole thing and just read it for what it says, and I'm just going to pray, Father, if I'm bringing, this is a dangerous prayer for anybody out there listening, Father, if I'm bringing preconceived bias to the text, please remove it from me, and just let your Holy Spirit show me what's there. Because if you pray that, I've described it like he grabs you by the neck and goes, you just, because you're going to get shaken up pretty bad if you're holding on too tightly to these other things that you think you know. And but that's a really good approach. What you're talking about there is just, okay, just read this. Just don't put all preconceived biases aside. Put everything you've been taught aside. Just read it. Now, what did you hear? What did you see there? Write it down. And after you do that, if you got 200 questions, that's going to paint a pretty serious picture. I mean, because each one's a piece of a puzzle, right? You're like, well, this was the answer that I had for that. This is the answer I had for that. Take a step back. Oh, wait a minute. This is a big picture that's very different from what I've been taught, because so few people do that exercise. They just sit there and, with all good intent, they listen to somebody that they love and trust, and they believe it has the truth, and then they just believe it because that's what they're taught. And I'm finding with so many topics, and the more I'm talking to you about this, the more I'm realizing how important this topic is. This is the house of God. This is the house of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, Yahuwah, the Creator. This is His house. He said, hey, here are the blueprints. Build it. And I didn't even think about it either until you said it earlier, for how many hundreds of years that thing was out. It wasn't just the 40 years in the wilderness. That thing was out and about, until Solomon's temple. And we got about a minute before the break, but I do want to talk to you about Solomon's temple briefly before we get into a few other things, because this question comes up a lot. I believe the Herod's temple was a rectangular box-like structure, but was Solomon's temple, or did Solomon's temple in some way mirror, on a bigger scale and with stone, the same circular structure as the tabernacle in the wilderness? And so we're about ready to go to break. So when we come back from break, maybe we can address that, and then we'll go into a few other things about recent updates and projects that you're working on and stuff like that. So we'll be right back after the break. Stand by. And we're back on the Revolutionary Radio Project. I'm your host, Rob Skiba. We're in the final half-hour segment of the broadcast, and I'm talking with my guest, Andy Hoy, about his circular tabernacle model. And, Andy, right before the break, I was asking, was the Temple of Solomon the same shape? Did you find any evidence? And it seems like I saw something from like the 1800s or something about Ezekiel's futuristic temple that was actually circular. That was pretty amazing. But has your research gone down, any of this past to confirm yay or nay in that regard?
Yeah, it's kind of funny you mentioned some of that. I think you're thinking of there's Christa Philadelphians or something like that. It's a kind of an American Christian congregation. I think it was 1800s, but not positive there. I had the thing on my website for a while. Maybe that was on my old website, but where they had kind of a circular arrangement. Now the Hebrew word for circle, or I should say around, is saviv, with samek bet vav. I'm sorry. Vav bet. So you got basically two houses or two letters, the bet letter is shaped like a tent floor plan or a house. So Saviv is speaking about going around, and so here you have the Samic, which is a round letter, a circular letter, and then you got a Vav. I'm sorry, a bet joined to another bet with a yud, or with a hand, or I don't think it's the Vav at all there, but anyway, it's an kind of the action oriented. So this idea of Saviv is really speaking to the circle, and in Ezekiel's language that term is used, and that's kind of where the guy springboarded off of. And he didn't really, I think his name is Holly or something like that. He didn't really get to the meat of a lot of stuff because he didn't have this pattern, is my opinion. Now, because you start looking at some of the other dimensions and stuff, and shifting the paradigms. Rob, of course, you just love poking sticks in beehives, don't you? But,
it's a sickness, man. I don't know what it is. It's just, I don't know.
So you're just trying to get me lynched by everyone here. So here's the problem with this this notion of Solomon's temple. People are just assuming, they use that as a proof. Well, the tabernacle couldn't have been round because the tabernacle was used for the design of Solomon's temple, and we know that Solomon's temple is rectangular. Oh, okay. Based on what? So you start on this discussion all over again, getting into the issue of supremacy of the pattern, quality of the revelation. Now, if you read the I want to say it's 2 Chronicles 3 and 1 Kings 6 and 7, whatever, of this house that David had built through Solomon, because David's the guy who received the plans for it or developed the plans for it, giving this is delegated to Solomon in that sense. Where was I going with this? I just lost my train of thought with the Solomon.
Was the temple circular? Yeah.
So those descriptions between Kings and Chronicles are quite different, and it's so different to the point where the Jews say, well, only the King's description is correct. Chronicles I think attribute usually to Ezra, and so this is coming from a priestly source. So you've got a story of the kings versus a story of the priests. These two things battling it out. When you start to put it together and look at it from a round standpoint, what I see is like, if you think of someone say, okay, describe a house. Well, if one guy's standing on the inside describing it, when another guy's standing on the outside describing it, and I'm not saying that's what it really amounts to, or guys who are from different backgrounds. You ask one guy who's an architect and the other guy who's a, who might be an artist or a painter or something like that. If they're going to describe the building differently, and so these two accounts they have a lot of interesting differences, and I wasn't able to fully reconcile this to the tabernacle, but I would say I'm about 80% there. And I haven't made it public because it's I cannot bring it forward with the absolute certainty that I can with the tabernacle. I mean, you want to go tabernacle, again, going head to head on every verse and every detail. I can make sense of, in my opinion, just about all of it. And so there's only a few fringe, words or phrases where it's like, this I think is like that. But really, there's not that much, and there's not much ambiguity. I mean, even despite a few adjustments that I've made as to my understanding since I discovered this, it's not changed the shape or the essence of the whole thing, because the numbers within the plan description are so defining and so correlating and things like that, where it just has to be. And I know that's a bold statement to be making, but again, I would challenge anyone to if you want to order my book, I'll say money back guarantee. If return it in 30 days if you're saying this thing doesn't work and you're a liar and exaggerator, etc. So let's see. But besides that, I don't know about how that works with Amazon, but go return it to Amazon, and if you want to just try to dump on it, then get it from Amazon, return it, and then let them deal with it. But then again, that makes a used market. So,
well, the as far as the Temple of Solomon, that temple has flipped me out for a long time, because you do any research into things like the Illuminati and Freemasonry, go to the George Washington Freemasonic building there in Washington, D.C., and it's like all Hebrew, and it's all Solomon, and it's all Solomon's temple. And when I'm reading this, it's the the Hittites and all the ites that the Israelites didn't get rid of, that were supposed to be annihilated, that actually built the thing, and 666 talents of gold brought in for this thing. I'm like, the more I look into Solomon's temple, the more I'm like, what the heck made this thing even remotely holy? And my conclusion was that at the time when Solomon fulfilled his father's dream for this, and he gives his prayer of dedication, he's still on the straight and narrow path. He's still doing good, walking in the ways of his father and whatnot. And he prays this beautiful prayer of dedication. And of course, I'm paraphrasing, but it was like Yahuwah looked down and said, "You know what, bro? That's pretty awesome, man. I appreciate what you did here. I'm going to put my name on this thing that you've constructed, and so long as you walk in my ways and do as your father David did, I will bless this thing and and make it holy. But if you don't, if you veer from my path and of my commandments and stray, then I'm going to take my name off of this thing." And I came to the conclusion that literally the only thing that made that thing holy was Yahuwah saying, "I'll put my name on this thing so long as you obey me." It goes off the rails from there, in my mind anyway. So it's apples and oranges, it's black and white, it's two different things as far as I'm concerned. The tabernacle, as we've been discussing in the show, has very specific, detailed instructions that are laid out for anybody to read for themselves. Go through the exercise, just read it, look at the words, look at how it's put together, and imagine what comes out there. Just like I always tell people when it comes to cosmology, look, just read Genesis chapter 1, throw everything out you think you've been taught, just read it, and tell me what you see. You come up with a different thing. So, constructing a model based on the descriptions, as you have done, where are you in this process, by the way? You told me on the phone the other day that you've got different scale models, and are you at a place now where you can actually build a physical structure that people can see for themselves, touch and experience?
Yes, and ish, almost. There's a number of models that are in play right now. I've got 5 different model sizes, physical model sizes, that are in various stages of development, etc. Some made for home and tabletop and desktop, and some made for much larger scenarios. And what was I going to say? I guess I'm wanting to go back on the temple, on the Solomon thing for a minute here, of whether the temple mound is round or not. Do you recall what was on the temple mound before they put the temple there?
No, I don't remember.
It was a threshing floor.
Oh, the threshing floor, yeah.
Yeah. So how does a threshing floor work? They have a post in the middle, and then they have oxen with a sled, a weighted sled that they pull in circles, and they use that to break the grain away from the stalk. Okay, so the grain gets trampled. So in the New Testament, you got see, Satan is asked you to sift you like wheat. So you got all this wheat, this idea of winning. The winnowing fork is in his hand. All this idea of threshing, and so this threshing notion is very powerful. The Hebrew word for grain is actually gerin. So you wonder where some of these these corollaries come from. So this idea that Solomon was building on a threshing floor. Well, again, oxen don't walk in squares. We've also got even the Arabs are they go and they walk what? They walk in circles around a square. And guess what? People every year get trampled. And part of why they would logically get tramples is because it creates a pinch point at this corner. And so they go for their Mecca pilgrimages like once a lifetime, as I understand. But the word that they use to describe this pilgrimage is the Hajj, which is like Hag Sameach, the Hug, this whole circular things tied in. So I wanted to kind of throw that down for the Solomon's Temple question before we moved out to
that is an
to the
interesting
model
point.
stuff.
I had threshing floor in my head as soon as you asked the question. I don't know why I'm like, but yeah.
I thought you knew, but I knew you knew actually.
Well,
but,
I knew, but you put on the spot and you're like, oh no, I don't know, I didn't study.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I knew you knew.
But the idea of that, going around like that's interesting. I never thought of that either. And actually, when it comes to like the sacrifices in the Levitical priesthood, and this was something that after you've introduced me to the model, and I'm continuing to go through the Torah portions, and we get to where how many animals are killed and how many Levites are there and have to eat, and I'm going, wait a minute, what was if we think of this huge circular dome tent with an inner court, outer court, and and all that, that a big portion of that is wide open. That would do very well for a large cafeteria, for preparing the animals, having people come in and eat. If all the Levites, like in the Book of Numbers, there have to eat in the tabernacle, that little rectangular shoebox isn't going to accommodate that meal,
I've kind of gone back and forth as to whether or not I believe that more than if the elders and others were allowed in, or if it was just the priest going in at beginning and end of day, because he's wearing these garments, but he's crossing that threshold and he's washing his feet. So I'm going to just move away. You can see on the model behind me there, the water basin is right near the edge of the roof. In the shoebox model, they plop that thing right in the middle of they plop that thing right in the middle of the courtyard, right? And you talked about people mustering, people gathering. Well, technically the floor space of this model, I want to say it's either 17 or 34 times bigger than what the shoebox model is. I forget exactly,
right,
to refresh myself on that, but. The bigger point and problem here is it talks about offering up the animals at the entrance of the tent of meeting.
Right.
Well, where's the entrance? What do we call the tent of meeting? Is it the courtyard or is it the other part? So where are you taking these animals? So you're taking these animals into like this big pasture. Do you turn the whole courtyard into where are you slaughtering? Because they basically show in a lot of these cartoon books where they're bringing the animal inside, and the altar is also packed neatly in the middle of this barren space otherwise in the courtyard. And this is where these people are, presenting. It's like, well, if they're supposed to slaughter it there and then sprinkle the blood and the, to the on the gates or on the altar rather, they're taking it to the gate or the opening and sprinkling on the altar. How does this work if that's 40 feet away or 50 feet away? It makes no sense. So from a logistics standpoint, what are you going to kill the animal outside and drag parts of it inside? And it's a logistical, it's a joke.
It's a nightmare. I mean, when you start reading like Leviticus and Numbers, and you start trying to imagine what is described there in this tiny little rectangular box model, it's completely absurd. But whereas if we look at the model that I just had on the screen, we put it back up there again, and for people who are watching this on YouTube, I mean, this is a 6-story high circular dome tent. It's like a huge circus tent, and you've got a little white a model of a white person there, a human to give scale. This is way different. There's a lot more room to do a lot more stuff with a lot more people and a lot more animals in this structure than you would ever get in that tiny little rectangular box model. Uh-oh. I think you froze up. Andy froze up. Hang on a second. I don't know if I can hang up and call back. Let me see what happens. Hang on. Sorry, guys. Andy dropped off here. Still trying to ring him back in. Come on, come on, come on. We were so close. Only, of course, we got 9 minutes left in the broadcast, and now he's gone. Let me see. Come on back, Andy. Oh, he's dropping off as if he's not available. Are you guys having buffering problems again? Is this happening again? Is Houston, we have a problem. Is anybody else in the chat room experiencing lag like we had before? I don't know what the deal is. Yes, do I trust this Andy fellow? I do. I do trust him. I've spent quite a bit of time with Andy and have read through a lot of his materials. Of course, I've had him on the show quite a number of times in the past. If people go through my archives, they can see the shows that I did with him in the past. He also came to our Bible Study Fellowship. Oh, Andy's calling me here. Hey, Andy. Hello? Hello?
Yes, hello.
Hi, you disappeared.
Yes, my internet cut out on me.
Well, we got about 7 minutes left in the broadcast. I'll put my cell phone up to my headset microphone. So, kind of a MacGyver way of doing this, but we can wrap up the show here. We got about 7 minutes left. So, whatever you'd like to share with the audience in the next 7 minutes, go ahead, and I'll just let's take a step back here.
Okay. I did end up trying to reset the internet, so maybe we'll get back on real quick. But where to wrap this up?
First of all, where can people get your information and contact you and see? You mentioned webinars and stuff before, so anything you want to plug in that regard, go ahead.
Yep. If you go to my homepage, I have a webinar coming up. My website is project314.org, and the basically the first banner at the top will take you. You click on that, and it'll take you to the page for the webinar registration. Webinar is 6 weeks. I'm doing the first 2 weeks on basically the tabernacle and mechanics and a little bit more of the project intro. The third week I'm talking about the human anatomy and how that's tied into the tabernacle as far as the Hebrew and all that. There's a lot of just body likeness. There's of course New Testament texts where they talk about, don't you know that or the body or there's the body temple analogies and everything. So these really become apparent once you start looking at the Hebrew and once you start looking at this round model. Let's see, the fourth session, I'm looking at the priestly garments and the resemblance of the priestly garments with the tabernacle. The fifth week, I'm looking at going through Vayikra, the first parsha of Leviticus, talking about all of the animal sacrifices. People have a hard time contextualizing them. Both Jews and Christians, they all take a very dispensational view on that, and I guess I'm looking to chime in on that. And then the next one, I'm kind of getting into some of the Jewish traditions that kind of illustrate this tabernacle, and as well as certain Christology, typology type stuff. So that's my kind of the webinar in a nutshell. let's see. Besides that, of course, you get the shop. The shop pages. You can get my books, my drawings. I actually have got a PowerPoint, which is a really good self-study tool for people who want to teach in their own little small group of this type of thing, or churches. It's really the Rose people have got one, and I figured, well, I can bang one out pretty quick here too. So I've got that, which is very much based on my book. It's less reading the book, and it goes through a lot of the same content. Again, a lot of this is contrasting with the shoebox. Let's see, what else do we have here? Getting into the, I was really hoping to have this for the visual here, but I'm not seeing the connection back yet. So I guess I'd like to kind of close by emphasizing, the importance of this whole Ohel Moed. Again, people are bent on saying, well, I keep the feast, I keep the Torah. Well, how are we doing this without the tabernacle? Again, this thing where he said, make this. He said, make this before he starts describing all this stuff to be doing at the feasts. So, the importance of this is, I think, very, very much undermined in our day. But a lot of this comes on the coattails of us not having any real understanding of the image. So, is this, something that we're in prophetic times now, where this is part of prophecy fulfillment of restoration? I mean, this is referenced in Ezekiel about mention of the tabernacle when it talks about the two sticks coming together. Well, the tabernacle is made in two half houses, and so you got the northern house and the southern house. You got Judah and Ephraim. So getting when these two things come together, you end up seeing a bunch of sticks that all come into alignment. So it's literally, I think, a fulfillment of the two house prophecy. So it talks about the Mishkan in the in the hills of northern Israel. It sounds like. So let's see. Getting into the Levitical things here. Well, actually, let me go back to say, as far as what we could use for project. This is not meant to be a spectator sport. This is not meant to be a solo project. It's not project314.me. It's project314.org. So the less that I can do, I'm doing a lot of different things, and I'm doing them inefficiently because in a lot of cases I have to do stuff myself. And I've got certain volunteers. I got a page dedicated to people who are volunteering in different capacity. Need for artist tech support and all that. I've got a kind of a skill set donation. When I say donation, contribution thing. When I say people who want to actually get involved, if you have certain professions, and we're looking to start into model building here. Or actually, I've got a model, and I guess I'd like to talk more about that. But hoping to have that at a congregation here in the Midwest where people can look at it in person. I guess hopefully we can do a follow-up at some point on this. The other thing I guess I'd like to point out is there's the Levites, right? So in the Torah it talks about the Levites, and everyone thinks they get a tenth. Well, they only get a tenth on the third year. Like it's 1 year and 3 is when the Levites' tenth was, and I bring this up because they were appointed to this tabernacle work, and so this whole idea of why did the Levites take the position is because the rest of the people said don't have God speak to us or we'll die. So it's like, okay, fine, what you say is okay. We'll get mediators, and these mediators will happen to be Levites. Well, I don't know.
Well, that's we'll have to pick that up on a second broadcast. We can definitely do this again. We're going to run out of time here in about 10 seconds. So good stuff, man. Really good having you on. Thanks, Andy, for coming. And everybody, project314.org. Check out more. And Andy, we'll get you back on, and we'll do a part 2.
All right. Excellent. Thanks much, Rob.
All right. Thanks, buddy. And thank you, guys. We'll see you back next week on the Revolutionary Radio Project.